Emmett Slade smelled death before he saw it. The stench drifted down from the valley ahead. Not wood smoke, not the clean scent of a campfire. Something fouler. The smell of burning homes and burning flesh. A smell he remembered from the war, from 100 battlefields across Virginia and Pennsylvania. He reined his horse Whiskey to a halt at the ridge line and studied the scene below. The Crow village lay in ruins. Teepees collapsed and smoldering. Bodies scattered across the frozen October ground. Men cut down where they stood. Women fallen beside cooking fires. Children lying in the dirt like broken toys. At least 20 dead, maybe more. Emmett had seen massacres before. During the war. During 20 years on the frontier. But this one made his stomach turn to ice. Because he recognized the tracks leading away from the carnage. 12 horses, heavy prints in the mud, moving fast toward the west. And there, clear as a signature in the dirt, the distinctive T-shaped horseshoe marks from the blacksmith shop in Virginia City, Montana. Cornelius Vance. Emmett's hands tightened on the reins until his knuckles went white. 3 years ago, Vance and his gang had ambushed a cattle drive on the road to Miles City, killed 6 men for the herd and the payroll. One of those men was Jonah Slade, Emmett's younger brother, 28 years old, shot in the back while trying to protect the other drovers. Emmett arrived 15 minutes too late, found Jonah face down in blood-soaked dust, eyes still open, hands still reaching for a gun he'd never had time to draw. He tracked Vance for 6 months after that, followed every rumor across 3 territories. But Vance always stayed one step ahead. Eventually, Emmett stopped chasing, started drifting, took jobs that kept him moving, kept him working, kept him from thinking about the brother he failed to save. Now Vance had slaughtered an entire village. The question was, why? The answer came from the tree line. She emerged from the pines with a hunting knife in her hand. Young, late 20s. Crow, judging by her clothing and the bone ornaments tangled in her black hair. Her buckskin dress was torn. Ash streaked her face, but her eyes showed no fear, and her knife hand was steady as stone. "Do not move," she said in clear English. "I will cut your throat before you draw." Emmett kept his hands visible, away from the Colt on his hip. "I didn't do this. Look at the tracks. I came from the east, from Bozeman." She studied the ground, reading the signs the way her people had read signs for 1,000 generations. His horse's prints, his boot marks, the freshness of the disturbed earth. Finally, she lowered the knife. "They came at dawn," she said. Her voice was flat, controlled, holding back a grief too vast to release. "No warning. They killed everyone. My father, my mother, my sisters." "Why?" She reached into her shirt and drew out a piece of worn leather. A map, hand-drawn lines marking rivers and ridges. One location circled in faded red ink. "Silver mine. My father found this vein 5 years
Don't move!
ago,
I'll slit
west
your
of
throat
Alder
before you
Gulch.
draw your gun!
Richer than
I
anything in
didn't do
Virginia
this.
City."
Look at
Her
the
dark
tracks.
eyes met
I
his.
came from the east.
Cornelius Vance wanted it. My father refused to sell, so Vance took it. Emmett felt the weight of fate pressing down on him. Vance had not just murdered his brother. Vance was slaughtering innocent people for greed, and he would keep killing until someone stopped him. "What's your name?" "Winona." "Emmett Slade. I have a cabin 3 miles east. Vance will realize you escaped. He'll come back for that map." He extended his hand. "We need to move. Now." She hesitated, measured him with those sharp eyes. Then she took his hand and climbed onto Whiskey behind him. They made it half a mile before the ambush. 4 riders burst from the trees ahead. Gunfire crackled through the valley. Emmett threw himself and Winona from the saddle as bullets whipped past their heads. They hit the frozen ground hard, rolled behind a fallen pine. He drew his Colt and fired twice. One rider dropped from his horse. "Run for the rocks," he shouted. "I'll hold them." Winona did not argue. She sprinted toward a cluster of boulders 30 yards away. More gunfire. Emmett pressed himself flat against the log. Bark exploded inches from his face. Then a voice echoed across the valley. A voice he would never forget. Slade! Cornelius Vance stepped out from behind a massive oak. Tall, thin, gray hairs in a scar running from temple to jaw. Former Confederate captain. The kind of man who had learned to kill during the war and never stopped. 3 years I've been waiting for this. Fate has a sense of humor, doesn't it? Emmett kept his Colt trained on Vance's chest. Let the woman go. This is between us. Vance laughed, a cold, hollow sound. The woman has something I need. So do you, apparently. He gestured to his remaining men. Surrender the map. I'll make your deaths quick. Emmett had 4 rounds left. 3 enemies with better cover. Then Winona's voice came from behind him. Quiet. Urgent. There's a path through the rocks. 30 steps to your right. I'll create a distraction. Before he could stop her, she threw her knife at the nearest gunman and ran. Chaos erupted. Emmett fired twice more, dropped another man, and scrambled into the rocky crevice. Behind him, Vance's furious voice echoed through the valley. Find the woman! She has the map! I want her alive! Emmett tracked Winona through the Montana wilderness for 2 hours. She moved well, chose rocky ground to hide her prints, crossed streams to break her trail. The skills of someone who had grown up in these mountains. He found her in a shallow cave behind a frozen waterfall, knife in another hand now, taken from one of the dead gunmen, ready to fight. Don't ever do that again, he said. It saved your life. It nearly killed you. She shrugged, the gesture of someone who had already accepted that death walked beside her. They reached his cabin well after dark. The cabin sat in a hidden valley, accessible only through a narrow draw. Log walls thick enough to stop a bullet. 1 door, 2 small windows, a fireplace cold with ash. Emmett built a fire while Winona examined the space. He watched her check the windows, test the door, memorize the layout. She was not just resting, she was evaluating whether this place was shelter or trap. You sleep inside tonight, he said. I'll keep watch. You're wounded. She nodded toward his shoulder,
Who taught you
where the
English?
bullet grazed still seeped
The
blood through his
missionaries.
shirt.
My father said I had
I've
to
had
understand the
worse.
language of the white people
He
to
sat on
survive.
the porch with his rifle across his knees. The night was cold and clear. Stars blazed across the Montana sky. An owl called somewhere in the darkness. An hour before dawn, Winona came outside. She sat on the porch step, leaving space between them. Who taught you English? Emmett asked. Missionaries. They came to our village when I was a child. My father believed we needed to understand the white man's language to survive in his world. Her voice grew quiet. He was right about many things, but he was wrong about survival. He fought back. He refused to give up the map, said the silver belonged to the land, not to men who would tear the mountains apart for profit. She paused. Vance shot him first, made my mother watch, then killed her too. Emmett said nothing. There were no words for that kind of loss. Your brother, Winona said. Vance killed him? 3 years ago, Jonah was 28, trying to make enough money to buy a ranch, start a family. Emmett stared at the fading stars. He never hurt anyone in his life. Vance shot him in the back for a payroll. And you've been hunting Vance ever since. For 6 months, then I gave up. Thought I could outrun the grief. He shook his head. You can't outrun anything. It just waits for you to stop moving. They sat in silence until sunrise. 2 people bound by loss, waiting for the dawn. The next day they fortified the cabin. Emmett showed Winona where to stack stones for cover, how to bar the door, which windows offered the best firing angles. She learned fast. Tied knots that would hold through a hurricane. Read terrain with instincts born from a lifetime in these mountains. While they worked, Emmett found her hair tie in the dirt outside the door, leather and beads. She had lost it during the chase. He handed it to her without comment. She took it, looked at him strangely. "It's yours," he said simply. "Figured you'd want it back." A small thing, but she understood what it meant. He paid attention. He returned what belonged to others. He followed a code. That evening, a rider appeared in the valley. Emmett raised his rifle. The rider stopped 50 yards out and held up both hands. "Slade, don't shoot. I come with information." Burleson Teague, 58 years old, gray beard and weathered face, bounty hunter with a reputation that cut both ways. "What do you want, Teague?" "Same thing you want. Cornelius Vance dead." Teague slowly dismounted, keeping his hands visible. $500 bounty on his head from the territorial governor. "I've been tracking him for 2 weeks. Winona stepped out of the cabin. "How did you find us?" "Followed Vance's men after the massacre. Lost them in the rocks. But I know Slade has a place in these valleys. Took me a while, but I'm patient." Teague's eyes narrowed. "Word is you have something Vance wants badly. Badly enough to kill a whole village." Emmett considered. Teague was not trustworthy, but another gun could tip the balance. "Where is Vance now?" "Ruby Creek, 8 miles west. 8 men left after your little ambush." Teague smiled. "That's still 8 against 2, unless you want to make it 8 against 3. The next morning, they set out to find Dakota, Winona's cousin. 22 years old, he had been hunting elk in the high country when Vance attacked. If he survived, he would go to Crow's Peak, the gathering place for her people in times of danger. 12 miles south through rugged mountain terrain, Teague led the way, claiming to know shortcuts through the wilderness. Emmett kept him in front where he could watch him. Trust was a luxury none of them could afford. They found signs of Vance's men along the trail, a burned trading post, bodies left unburied. The gang was moving through the territory like a plague, killing anyone who might report their presence. They reached Crow's Peak late in the afternoon. The peak was a massive granite outcrop jutting from the mountainside. Caves honeycombed its base,
tonight. I'll stand
a
guard.
defensive position that had protected
If you
Winona's
fall,
people for
neither of us will
generations.
survive.
Dakota was there, lean, hard-muscled, arrow wound in his left leg from a close escape, but alive, alert, bow drawn with an arrow nocked. When he saw Winona, his stoic expression cracked. "I thought everyone was dead," he breathed. She ran to him, embraced him fiercely. "I saw everything from the ridge," Dakota said. "They killed our people like animals. I could do nothing. You survived. That's what matters now." Emmett stood watch while Winona tended her cousin's wound. The young man would heal. He would walk. He would fight. 3 guns now, and a bow, against 8 men. Still bad odds, but better than before. Then Emmett heard the click of a hammer being cocked behind him. He turned slowly. Teague stood 10 feet away, pistol aimed at Emmett's chest, smiling. "Sorry, Slade. The bounty on Vance is nothing compared to what he's paying for that map and the girl." Emmett's blood turned to ice. "You've been working for him all along." "From the start, Vance knew she'd look for survivors. I just had to follow you to them." Teague's smile widened. "Hand over the map. Nobody else has to die today." Winona slowly drew the map from her shirt, held it out. Teague reached for it. She threw dirt in his eyes. Emmett lunged. They crashed to the ground. The gun fired. The bullet tore through Teague's shoulder. The old bounty hunter screamed, clawed for a second pistol. Emmett was faster, drew his Colt, fired once. Teague went still. Then from the valley below, the sound Emmett had been dreading. Hoofbeats, the flicker of torches in the gathering dusk. Vance had found them. 8 riders, Dakota reported from the rocks. Coming fast. Emmett checked his ammunition. 12 rounds for the Winchester, 10 for the Colt. We can't outrun them, not with Dakota's leg. Winona looked at him steadily. No fear in her eyes, only resolve. Then we make our stand. They chose their ground at the entrance to Snake River Canyon, a narrow passage between two sheer cliff walls, wide enough for two men to walk side by side. No more. Perfect for defense. Emmett worked through the night, strung tripwires across the path using rope from his saddlebag, stacked loose stones at the canyon's edge where they could be pushed down on attackers, positioned Winona on the left flank with Teague's Remington revolver, positioned Dakota higher up with his bow. Aim for the horses first, he told them. Slow them down. Make them fight on foot. In this narrow ground, their numbers mean nothing. Winona checked her weapon. 6 rounds in the cylinder. How many battles have you fought? More than I can count. 4 years in the war, 20 years after. He loaded his Winchester with careful precision. I've learned one thing. The side that keeps calm usually wins. Dawn broke over the Beartooth Mountains. The sun painted the peaks gold and crimson. Mist rose from the river far below. Birds sang in the pines as if the world were at peace. Then Vance and his men entered the canyon. 8 riders, armed with rifles and pistols, Vance at the front, gray coat buttoned against the morning chill. Slade, his voice echoed off the stone walls. I know you're up there. Surrender the map and I'll let you walk away. You're 45 years old. Too old for this fight. Emmett said nothing. He waited. The first horses hit the tripwire.
We can't win.
2 men went down
in this
hard.
Narrow passage,
Dakota's arrow caught one in the
Stay
shoulder
calm.
before
We'll
he
survive.
could rise. Emmett fired the Winchester twice. 2 more dropped. Take cover, Vance screamed. The canyon erupted in gunfire. Bullets ricocheted off stone. Rock chips flew like shrapnel. The noise was deafening, multiplied by the narrow walls. Harlan Riggs, Vance's second-in-command, tried to flank them, climbed the western slope while his companions provided covering fire. Winona saw him, fired, missed. Riggs laughed from behind a boulder. Crow girl, you shoot like a child. He raised his rifle to take careful aim. Winona waited, steady, patient. Riggs rose to fire. She pulled the trigger. The bullet caught him in the throat. He tumbled down the slope and did not move again. The battle lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, 6 of Vance's men lay dead in the canyon. 1 tried to flee on foot. Dakota's arrow found him before he reached the trees. Another raised his hands in surrender. Emmett let him run. The man scrambled down the canyon and disappeared. Only Vance remained. He stood in the center of the killing ground, pistol in hand, gray coat stained with other men's blood. The scar on his face twisted by a bitter smile. Just you and me now, Slade. The way it should have been 3 years ago. Emmett walked out from behind his cover, descended the slope slowly. The Winchester stayed on his back. His hand rested on the Colt at his hip. 20 paces separated them. Your brother begged before he died, Vance said. Did you know that? Cried like a child. Called your name. Jonah never begged for anything in his life. You're lying. How would you know? You weren't there. Vance's smile sharpened. That's the thing about you, Slade. You're never there when people need you. Emmett felt the old rage stirring, the fury he had carried for 3 years. But he forced it down, controlled his breathing, kept his hand steady. Tell me one thing, he said quietly. Why kill him? He was just a drover, had nothing worth taking. Vance shrugged, the gesture of a man with a conscience. He recognized me in Miles City, knew I was selling rifles to hostile tribes, stirring up wars, then selling information to the army. Profit from both sides. His eyes were cold as winter stone. Your brother was going to report me to Fort Keogh. I had no choice. Emmett stood perfectly still. Jonah had not died in a random robbery. He had died because he discovered the truth, because he tried to do the right thing, because he was brave and good in everything Emmett had failed to be. Thank you, Emmett said. Vance frowned. For what? For telling me my brother died with honor, for giving me a reason to kill you without a single regret. And they drew at the same instant. 2 shots rang out as one. The sound echoed through the canyon like thunder. Vance stood frozen for a heartbeat, a neat hole in the center of his forehead. Then he fell. Emmett lowered his Colt. Vance's bullet had punched through the brim of his hat, 1 inch lower, and he would be dead. He walked to the body, looked down at the man who had haunted his nightmares for 3 years. "That was for Jonah," he said quietly, "and for everyone else you murdered." Winona appeared beside him. Dakota limped close behind. "It's over," she said. "Yes." Emmett took a long breath, let it out slowly. "It's over." They buried the dead in the canyon. Not out of respect. Bodies drew predators. Dakota's leg would heal cleanly. He walked with a limp, but he would recover. Winona offered Emmett the map. "You earned this. Take it." He shook his head. "I'm 45 years old. Don't need silver. Use it to rebuild. Find other survivors. Start your people again. The only crow I have left is Dakota. Then start with 2. He looked toward the northern mountains. "There are crow camps up near the Yellowstone. I was heading to Fort Ellis anyway. Still have a letter to deliver. We could travel together. Safer that way." She studied him for a long moment. "Why do you help us? The real reason?" Emmett considered the question, thought about Jonah, about all the times he had arrived too late, about the weight of regret he had carried for 3 years. "Because I spent too long running from ghosts. Maybe it's time I did something that matters instead." Winona nodded slowly. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust exactly, but the beginning of respect. "Then we ride north, together." They mounted up as the sun climbed toward noon. 3 riders heading north along the Yellowstone River. The Beartooth Mountains stood tall behind them, snow-capped and eternal. Gold leaves drifted from the aspens and scattered across their path. Dakota spoke first. "What waits for us?" Emmett looked toward the horizon, mountains and valleys and endless sky. "I don't know. But whatever it is, we face it together." Winona glanced back at the canyon, at the place where her old life had ended and something new had begun. "No more running," she said quietly. "No more running," Emmett agreed. They rode into the Montana afternoon. 3 survivors, bound by loss, forged by fire, carrying their dead with them, but refusing to let the dead drag them down. Because that was what you did when you survived. You honored the fallen by living. You paid your debts in blood when you had to, and you kept moving forward, no matter how hard the road. The valley stretched before them, golden, vast, full of danger and possibility. Emmett Slade did not look back. The ghosts were finally at rest. The end. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments where you watch from. Subscribe for more tales from the Old West. The frontier has many more stories to tell.
This story reminds us that hatred may keep us alive, but only responsibility and conscience will help us live right. The cowboy, tormented by the fact he couldn't save his younger brother, thought he could escape his memories by wandering. But ultimately, he understood. Pain doesn't disappear. It just waits for us to confront it. When he encountered the local woman who had lost her entire family, he chose not to stand idly by, but to protect what was right, even if it meant risking his own life. The greatest lesson is, sometimes we cannot change the past, but we can decide what we do in the present. Trust is built on small actions and perseverance. And when people know how to stand together, loss will no longer be just a wound, but a strength to move forward.